Karen Sanders pointed a manicured finger at me, screaming, "Arrest this trespasser," while I calmly swept the same steps I've swept for 40 years. 2 patrol cars screeched into the cul-de-sac. Handcuffs clicked around my wrists, and not one neighbor who owed me everything said a single word. My name is Walter Higgins, 78 years old, janitor of Maple Ridge Estates, widower, grandfather, and quietly patient man. I'd swept these sidewalks since 1980, back when Maple Ridge was nothing but dirt roads and my own construction crew's dreams. Karen Sanders became HOA president 3 years ago, tightening rules, fining neighbors, treating the community like her personal kingdom. She never asked my name, only barked orders, calling me the help whenever my cart blocked her precious driveway view. I let it slide, kept my head down, remembered why I still showed up every morning long after I needed the paycheck. One Tuesday, Karen found my tool shed parked near her mailbox and demanded I move it before the neighborhood looks trashy. I explained the shed sat on a maintenance easement, exactly where it always had, exactly where the deed allowed it. She scoffed, insisting easements were janitor excuses, and threatened to report me to management for insubordination. I bit my tongue, wheeled the cart away, though something in her tone that day felt sharper than usual. By Friday, a notice appeared on my shed door. Violation. Unauthorized structure. Signed personally by Karen Sanders, HOA president. I called the HOA office, calmly explaining the easement paperwork. But the clerk said Karen had handled it herself. Karen cornered me by the pool gate, smirking, saying rules applied to everyone, even people who think they're untouchable. I asked what she meant by untouchable. She just laughed and walked off, heels clicking against my freshly mopped tile. The next violation notice fined me $200 for unsightly equipment, though nothing had moved from its spot. I paid it quietly, not wanting trouble, though my daughter Ruth urged me to fight back against Karen's harassment. Karen began following my cleaning schedule, timing my breaks, reporting me for loitering near the clubhouse she controlled. Residents whispered that Karen enjoyed power more than fairness, yet nobody dared challenge her tightening grip on Maple Ridge. She started restricting my access to certain buildings, claiming liability, though I'd held master keys since the community's founding. I discovered new locks on the north wing, installed without notice, cutting off decades of routine maintenance access. When I asked why, Karen said simply, "Some spaces aren't for staff," her eyes cold, calculating, strangely triumphant. I remembered my late wife's warning years ago, "Never let anyone forget what you're truly worth around here." Karen filed a formal complaint claiming I damaged shrubbery, though photos showed the damage happened weeks before I arrived. The HOA board, handpicked by Karen, voted unanimously against me without ever asking for my side of things. I felt the walls closing in, decades of quiet service dismissed by a woman who barely knew my name. My grandson Michael begged me to show them the old deeds, but I wasn't ready to reveal that secret yet. Karen's harassment escalated into public humiliation, scolding me loudly during the summer barbecue while everyone watched in silence. I swept faster, smiled less, and started keeping careful notes of every violation, every insult, every unfair fine. For 2 weeks, Karen ignored me entirely, busy campaigning for re-election, promising residents even stricter community standards. I used the quiet to visit my late wife's grave, reminding myself patience had always outlasted people like Karen. My daughter Ruth suggested finally exposing the truth, but I told her timing mattered more than satisfaction. Neighbors started greeting me warmly again, unaware Karen was quietly building a bigger, crueler plan behind closed doors. Karen discovered old blueprints in the archive room, blueprints bearing a name she didn't recognize. W. Higgins Holdings. Instead of investigating, she assumed forgery, convinced someone was scamming the HOA using a fake historical company. She hired a private investigator, determined to prove I'd stolen documents or falsified my janitor employment records. The investigator found nothing incriminating, only confusing property records Karen refused to examine closely enough to understand. Karen doubled down, telling the board I was hiding something, fueling suspicion against the man who'd built their homes. She banned me from HOA meetings, claiming my presence made residents uncomfortable. Though nobody had ever complained before, I overheard her calling me just some old squatter janitor to a contractor renovating the clubhouse kitchen. That night, I finally opened the safe deposit box I'd avoided touching since my wife's passing years ago. Inside were original 1980 land deeds, construction permits, and ownership transfers for every lot in Maple Ridge Estates. I built this neighborhood myself, sold homes through a shell company, then stayed on as janitor out of humility. Karen filed one final complaint, accusing me of trespassing near her driveway, escalating things beyond anything reasonable. She called the police, insisting I'd threatened her, twisting our polite exchange into something dangerous and false. Officers arrived skeptical, but Karen's confident tone convinced them enough to detain me right there on the sidewalk. Neighbors gathered, phones raised, filming the elderly janitor being handcuffed while Karen smiled, savoring her manufactured victory. I stayed calm, remembering the deeds locked safely at home, remembering patience always outlasts cruelty in the end. Finally, Karen announced loudly, "Someone's holding this fraud accountable," unaware how quickly her words would collapse around her. My grandson Michael arrived just in time, phone recording everything, including Karen's gloating confession about planning this arrest. At the station, I calmly requested one phone call, dialing my longtime attorney instead of any family member. My attorney arrived within the hour, carrying a briefcase thick with property deeds Karen had never seen. The desk officer's expression shifted the moment my attorney mentioned Higgins Holdings, sole owner of Maple Ridge Estates. Karen, still at the station filing paperwork, froze hearing my full legal name spoken aloud for everyone. "Walter Higgins," the officer repeated, flipping through documents. "As in the developer who built this entire community?" Karen's smug expression cracked, replaced by confusion, then dawning horror as reality finally caught up with her. My attorney explained calmly that every home, every street, every clubhouse Karen controlled still legally belonged to me. The charges were dropped instantly, replaced by an entirely different, far more uncomfortable conversation for Karen Sanders. I stood, dusted off my uniform, and asked Karen directly why she'd never once bothered learning my name. She stammered excuses about misunderstanding, but the recording Michael captured told a very different, damning story. I revealed the deeds publicly,
Explaining ide staya umbla intentionali.
watching how people truly treated working men. Gasps rippled through the crowd as residents realized their janitor technically owned the ground beneath their houses. Karen demanded proof was fabricated, but county records confirmed everything within minutes. Live on someone's phone screen, the HOA board, terrified of lawsuits, immediately called an emergency session, stripping Karen of her presidency that night. I announced calmly that anyone treated unfairly under Karen's rule could file formal complaints through my legal team. Residents who'd stayed silent suddenly found their voices, sharing stories of Karen's years of quiet, calculated cruelty. Karen tried threatening lawsuits, but my attorney reminded her retaliation against a property owner carried serious legal consequences. Michael's video went viral overnight, transforming quiet Maple Ridge Estates into national news within 48 hours. Karen's own violations, ironically, became public record, including fines she'd illegally issued using falsified property assessments. I requested only one thing: genuine accountability, not revenge, though the community demanded far harsher consequences instead. The board voted to permanently ban Karen from HOA involvement, citing abuse of power and fraudulent enforcement practices. Karen packed boxes within the week, humiliated, exposed, and finally unable to hide behind manufactured authority anymore. Neighbors who'd ignored my arrest now apologized individually, ashamed they'd stayed silent while cuffs closed around my wrists. I returned to sweeping steps the following morning, though residents now greeted me as Mr. Higgins. Finally, respectfully, Karen moved away quietly, her name becoming local shorthand for HOA overreach whenever anyone mentioned Maple Ridge Estates. I still sweep occasionally, not from necessity, but because these streets, built by my hands, deserve honest care.